Something just exploded in the hip-hop world, and nobody saw it coming. What started as a few slick comments suddenly turned into a full-blown war after Tony Yayo dropped what fans are calling a straight-up expose on Jim Jones. We're not talking about light shade or playful jabs. This was personal, calculated, and designed to hit hard. For a moment, it looked like Jim Jones might stay quiet, but that silence didn't last long. Out of nowhere, he fired back, and when he did, the entire tone of the situation changed. His response wasn't just a comeback, it felt like a warning. The kind of message that makes you realize this isn't just rap beef anymore. This is something deeper, something that's been building behind the scenes for a long time. Now fans are split. Some are backing Tony Yayo, saying he finally said what others were afraid to say. Others are riding with Jim Jones, claiming he just exposed the truth behind the so-called expose. And if you think that's all, think again. There are whispers of more receipts, more secrets, and possibly even bigger names about to get dragged into this situation. So the real question is, who's telling the truth? And more importantly, who's about to take the biggest hit as this drama keeps escalating? Because if this is just the beginning, things are about to get way more intense. The tension didn't just appear overnight. It had been building quietly, layer by layer, long before the public ever caught on. Right after that explosive moment, all eyes shifted to Jim Jones. Fans weren't just waiting, they were watching closely, analyzing every move, every post, every subtle reaction. Because in situations like this, silence isn't just silence, it's strategy. And for a brief moment, Jim Jones did stay quiet. No immediate clap back. No rushed response. Nothing. But that silence? It only made things worse. Because while he was quiet, Tony Yayo wasn't. Yayo kept talking, and every time he spoke, things got a little more intense. He didn't just repeat what he said, he doubled down. He made it clear that what he put out wasn't just gossip or industry chatter. According to him, this was real, personal, and something he had been holding onto for a long time. That's when the internet started to shift. Clips started circulating. Old interviews resurfaced. People began connecting dots that most fans had never even noticed before. Suddenly, this wasn't just about one comment. It felt like a deeper story was being uncovered piece by piece. And then, Jim Jones finally responded. Not with a weak statement. Not with a casual tweet. He came back with energy. The kind of energy that instantly lets you know he wasn't about to let this slide. From the moment he opened his mouth, you could feel the tone. Calm but sharp. Controlled but aggressive. He didn't look shaken. If anything, he looked like someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. And instead of denying everything outright, he flipped the narrative. He questioned motives. He hinted that this wasn't about truth, it was about attention. And that's when things got even more interesting. Because instead of just defending himself, Jim Jones started subtly turning the spotlight back onto Tony Yayo. He didn't need to say everything directly. The way he spoke, the way he framed his words, it was enough to make people start asking a different question. Why now? Why would Tony Yayo suddenly come out with this? Why bring this up at this exact moment? Was this really about exposing the truth, or was there something else going on behind the scenes? And just like that, the narrative split in two. On one side, you had fans who believed Tony Yayo was finally speaking up. They argued that in an industry full of fake alliances and hidden agendas, it takes someone bold to break the silence. To them, this wasn't messy, it was necessary. But on the other side, people weren't buying it. They saw it differently. They believed this was calculated. That timing like this doesn't happen by accident. That maybe, just maybe, this was more about stirring controversy than revealing facts. And Jim Jones? He leaned right into that idea. Without raising his voice, without looking emotional, he made it clear that he wasn't rattled. If anything, he seemed almost confident. Like he knew something the public didn't. And that confidence started to shift opinions. Because in situations like this, perception is everything. It's not just about what's said, it's about how it's said. And Jim Jones? He didn't look like someone caught off guard. He looked prepared, which only made things more suspicious. Because if he was ready for this, that means he might have seen it coming. And if he saw it coming, then what does that say about everything happening behind the scenes? That's when things started getting even deeper. People began digging into past connections, old affiliations, moments where these two had crossed paths or shared the same circles. And while nothing was crystal clear, there was enough there to suggest one thing: this wasn't random. There was history here, unspoken tension, possibly unresolved issues that never made it to the public until now. And as more people started paying attention, the conversation evolved. It wasn't just who's right anymore. It became, what aren't we being told? Because both sides were speaking, but neither side was saying everything. Tony Yayo was bold, but selective. Jim Jones was confident, but calculated. And in the middle of all that, fans were left trying to piece together a story that clearly had more layers than anyone expected. Then came another twist. Subtle, but powerful. A few cryptic messages started appearing online. Nothing direct. Nothing that could be easily quoted. But enough to keep people talking. Enough to make it clear this situation wasn't cooling down anytime soon. If anything, it was heating up. Fast. Because now, it wasn't just about Tony Yayo and Jim Jones anymore. There was a feeling, an underlying tension, that other names could get pulled into this at any moment. And that's when things go from drama to something much bigger. Because in the hip-hop world, once lines start getting crossed publicly, it rarely stays contained. And if more voices start entering the conversation, if more receipts start coming out, this could turn into something nobody can control. Right now, it's a war of words. But the way things are moving, it might not stay that way for long. And the craziest part? It still feels like we've only seen the surface. Because if both sides are holding back, even just a little, then what happens when everything finally comes out? Who's really telling the truth? Who's playing the game? And who's about to get exposed next? Because one thing is clear. This situation is far from over. And what comes next might be the moment that changes everything. And just when it felt like things couldn't get any more intense, the situation took another unexpected turn. Because now, it wasn't just about what was being said publicly, it was about what was happening behind the scenes. Sources close to the situation started hinting that conversations were happening off camera. Phone calls, messages, back-and-forth exchanges that the public wasn't hearing, but could definitely feel. The energy shifted. The tone got heavier. And suddenly, this didn't feel like entertainment anymore. It felt personal. Jim Jones wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed more locked in than ever. Every time he spoke, it carried weight. Not loud, not reckless, but precise. Like someone who understood exactly what was at stake. And then there was Tony Yayo. Still standing firm. Still unapologetic. Still making it clear that he meant every word he said. But here's where things got complicated. Because while both sides were holding their ground, the audience started noticing something strange. Neither of them was fully going all the way. Think about it. If Tony Yayo really had everything, every detail, every receipt, why not drop it all at once? Why stretch it out? Why leave room for interpretation? And on the other side, if Jim Jones was completely unfazed, completely confident, then why respond the way he did? Why not shut it down completely instead of keeping it controlled, almost strategic? That's when the conversation shifted again. This wasn't just a back and forth anymore. It started to feel like a chess match. Every move calculated. Every word chosen carefully. Every reaction timed. And in a situation like that, you have to ask yourself, what's the end game? Because this level of tension doesn't just exist for no reason. There's always something bigger underneath. And some fans started to believe that this wasn't just about Tony Yayo and Jim Jones at all. It might be about influence, reputation, position in the culture. Because in hip-hop, respect isn't just given, it's protected. And once someone feels like that respect is being challenged publicly, it changes everything. That's when more voices started creeping into the conversation. Not directly, at least not yet, but through reactions. Subtle cosigns. Side comments. People choosing sides without fully stepping into the spotlight. And that's always a dangerous sign. Because once sides start forming, things escalate fast. Now, there's pressure. Pressure to respond harder. Pressure to reveal more. Pressure to not look weak. And both Jim Jones and Tony Yayo know exactly how this works. They've seen situations like this before. They know how quickly things can spiral. Which is why everything they're doing right now feels so controlled. But control only lasts for so long. Because the internet doesn't wait. Fans don't wait. And once people start demanding answers, that pressure builds fast. Then came another moment that really made people stop and pay attention. A clip surfaced short, but powerful. It wasn't a direct response, not something that clearly confirmed or denied anything. But the tone, the energy, it added fuel to the fire. People started dissecting every second of it. Body language, choice of words, even what wasn't said. Because by now, everyone understood one thing: nothing in this situation was accidental. And that clip? It felt intentional. Like a message, but only for those paying close attention. And once that hit the internet, everything escalated again. Now fans weren't just reacting, they were picking sides aggressively. Debates turned into arguments. Arguments turned into full-blown online wars. And in the middle of all that noise, the original issue started to evolve into something bigger than itself. It became about loyalty, about credibility, about who people believe. Because at this point, facts almost didn't matter as much as perception. And perception? That's where things get dangerous. Because once the public decides how they see you, it's hard to change that narrative. And right now, both sides are fighting for that narrative. Jim Jones is leaning into confidence, composure, experience. He's presenting himself as someone who's been through too much to be shaken by something like this. While Tony Yayo is leaning into boldness, directness, fearlessness. He's positioning himself as someone who isn't afraid to say what others won't. Two completely different energies. Two completely different approaches. And that's exactly why this situation is so unpredictable. Because there's no clear winner. Not yet. And maybe that's the point. Because as long as it stays unresolved, people keep watching. People keep talking. People keep choosing sides. And the longer that continues, the bigger it gets. But here's where things start to feel like they're reaching a breaking point. Because moments like this don't last forever. Eventually, something gives. Someone says too much. Someone reveals something they can't take back. Or someone else steps in and changes the entire direction of the situation. And there are already signs that might happen. Because behind all the noise, all the reactions, all the speculation, there's still that feeling that something bigger is coming. Something that could shift everything overnight. And if that happens, this won't just be another hip-hop moment. It'll be one of those situations people look back on and say, that's when everything changed. Right now, we're still in the middle of it. Still watching it unfold in real time. Still trying to figure out what's real and what's being played. But one thing is certain. This story isn't finished. Not even close. And whatever happens next, it's going to hit harder than anything we've seen so far. So the question is, who's really in control of this situation? And when the final move gets made, who's going to come out on top? Because at this level, there's no such thing as a small loss. Only winners. And people who get exposed when it's all over. And just when it seemed like the situation had reached its peak, everything shifted. Not slowly. Not subtly. All at once. Because the moment everyone had been waiting for, the moment where things either cool down or completely explode, finally arrived. And it didn't come from a long speech. It didn't come from a full interview. It came from something much more dangerous. A direct message. Not private, but public enough to hit exactly where it needed to. When Jim Jones stepped forward again, there was something different this time. The calm confidence was still there, but now it was sharper. More direct. Less patient. This wasn't a response anymore. This felt like a line being drawn. He didn't dance around the situation. He didn't leave things open-ended. The tone made one thing clear. He was done playing along. And without saying too much, he said enough to shake everything. Because instead of just defending himself, Jim Jones started hinting at something deeper, something that completely flipped the pressure back onto Tony Yayo. It wasn't loud, but it was effective. The kind of statement that makes people pause and think, wait, what does he know? And just like that, the energy shifted again. Now the spotlight wasn't just on Jim Jones anymore. It swung right back to Tony Yayo. And for the first time since this whole situation started, there was pressure on him to respond. Not just react. Not just repeat what he already said. But actually take it further. Because once someone hints that they have more, once they suggest that the story isn't what it seems, you can't just stay silent. And for a moment, that's exactly what happened. Silence. From Tony Yayo. No immediate follow-up. No quick response. Nothing. And that silence? It hit just as hard as any statement. Because now people started asking a different question. Did Jim Jones just flip the entire situation? Because up until this point, Tony Yayo had control of the narrative. He was the one making the claims. He was the one setting the tone. But now it felt like the balance had shifted. And the internet noticed immediately. Speculation went into overdrive. Some people believed Jim Jones had just exposed cracks in Tony Yayo's story. Others thought this was just another strategic move, another layer in a back and forth that still hadn't reached its final form. But regardless of what people believed, one thing was clear: the situation had changed. And then, Tony Yayo responded. But not in the way people expected. There was no panic. No hesitation. Just a calm, but firm, statement that made it clear he wasn't backing down. Tony Yayo doubled down again. He stood on everything he had already said. And, more importantly, he made it clear that he wasn't done. That there was more to come. And just like that, whatever hope there was of this situation slowing down, gone. Because now both sides had done the same thing. They had committed. There was no walking it back. No misunderstanding. No room for quiet resolution. This had gone too far. And once things reach that point, there's only one direction left. Forward. But forward doesn't always mean louder. Sometimes, it means smarter. And that's exactly what started happening next. Instead of constant back and forth, both sides became more selective. More calculated. More intentional. Every word mattered. Every appearance mattered. Even silence mattered. Because at this stage, it wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about controlling the narrative long-term. About making sure that when everything settles, the public sees your version of the story as the truth. And that's where this situation became something much bigger than a typical hip-hop feud. Because now, it wasn't just about Tony Yayo versus Jim Jones. It was about image, legacy, and perception. Two artists with history, influence, and reputations to protect, now locked in a situation where every move could either strengthen or damage everything they've built. And the closer it got to that breaking point, the more intense it became. Then came one final moment that changed everything. Not a rant, not a diss, but a statement, short, controlled, and powerful, that made people stop and really think about everything they had just witnessed. It didn't confirm everything. It didn't deny everything. But it brought the entire situation into perspective. Because at the end of it all, what this situation really showed was how quickly things can escalate, how fast narratives can shift, and how in a world where perception moves faster than facts, the truth can get lost somewhere in between. Jim Jones stood firm. Tony Yayo stood firm. Neither side collapsed. Neither side fully won. But both made one thing clear: they weren't going to let the other control their story. And maybe that's the real ending here. Not a clear victory. Not a clean resolution. But a reminder that in situations like this, the loudest voice doesn't always win. The smartest one does. And as the noise slowly starts to settle, as the reactions fade, as the internet moves on to the next big moment, one question still lingers: what was actually real? And what was just part of the game? Because if there's one thing this situation proved, it's that sometimes what you see on the surface is only a fraction of what's really going on. And by the time the full truth comes out, if it ever does, the story might already be over. If you made it this far, you already know this situation is far from ordinary. The tension between Jim Jones and Tony Yayo isn't just another headline. It's something deeper, and it's still unfolding right in front of us. Now I want to hear from you. Who do you think is really telling the truth here? Is Jim Jones playing this smart and staying one step ahead, or is Tony Yayo exposing something the industry didn't want out? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those moments where every opinion matters, and trust me, things are only getting more intense from here. And don't just watch and leave. If you're into real hip-hop drama, behind-the-scenes tension, and stories that go beyond the surface, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Because the next update on this situation? It could change everything. Also, turn on notifications so you don't miss a single detail. You already know how fast things move in this game. One post, one clip, one statement, and the whole story flips. Share this video with anyone who's been following this drama, because the more eyes on it, the bigger the conversation gets. This isn't over. Not even close. And when the next piece drops, you're going to want to be here for it.